Welcome to our lecture on verbal message, the world of words. It's often tricky to figure out exactly what someone means in a conversation because the words we use and the meaning we assign to them can be pretty complex. Whether we're defining a relationship, expressing affection, explaining something, or just ordering a fancy espresso, our words significantly impact how we interact with others. It's essential for communicators to ensure everyone understands the message to create a shared understanding. From the early days of studying communication, scholars have been interested in how we use words and how best to articulate them, whether spoken or written. The ancient Greeks, for instance, described effective communication using key components: logos, ethos, and pathos. Logos refer to logical arguments. Ethos involves the speaker's credibility and charisma, and pathos focused on emotional engagement. Famous thinkers like Plato or Socrates, Aristotle explored how to use language to promote intellectual and moral growth. Since then, both ancient and modern scholars have developed theories and practical approaches to rhetoric effectively. This helps us achieve a shared understanding of conversations. So, some examples of how logos, ethos might be applied in everyday interaction to improve clarity and understanding. Number one, logos, the logical argument. In the workplace, when proposing a new project or idea, you might use data statistics to support your argument. For example, implementing the XYZ software could increase our efficiency by 35%, as shown by success rates in similar companies. In personal life, when discussing plans with family or friends, you might use logical reasoning to decide on a meeting spot. For instance, let's meet up at Starbucks because it's closer for all of us and has really good reviews on ambiance. Ethos, the credibility and charisma in the workplace. An example is to establish credibility in a team meeting, you might reference your experiences or qualifications. For example, as someone who has managed similar projects for over 5 years, I believe this approach would be the most effective. In your personal life, when giving advice to a friend or family member, you might build trust by showing empathy and sharing relevant experiences. For example, having gone through something similar myself, I found that talking to a counselor can really help. Pathos, the emotional engagement. So, in the workplace, to motivate your team, you might share a compelling story or your vision. So, for example, imagine the impact our work could have on the community. Think about the families that will be helping with our new program. In your personal life, when resolving a conflict with a loved one, you might express your feelings of sincerity. You can say things like, I felt really hurt when you didn't call me back because it made me feel unimportant to you. Precise language lets them know exactly what you're feeling. Using these three components can help make your communication more effective and ensure that your message is understood and appreciated by your audience. To create clear verbal messages, it's important to understand how verbal communication works. Verbal communication involves both intentional and unintentional messages using language, which essentially is a system of symbols we all sort of have agreed on. These symbols are often words that they can represent anything from concrete things like a squirrel or a cantaloupe to an abstract idea like love, hope, or prosperity. Without language, we wouldn't be able to convey much more than basic concepts, right? Language has unique characteristics that allow it to convey meaning to many people who understand the agreed upon structure of sounds and symbols. So let's say that you have a favorite meal and it's an amazing pasta dish with garlic sauce for lunch or dinner, and a friend of yours wants to make the same food at home and calls to ask for instructions. You would have to think about where to start and explain each item that goes into it. Each ingredient has a name made up of different letters. When you say garlic, your friend probably knows what that ingredient is. You can then use more words to explain the difference between a fresh clove of garlic, garlic salt, or the toasted garlic flakes that are found in some dishes. Now think about how hard it would be to describe that bagel if your friend had never heard of garlic or tasted it in any form. Every single thing you can see or imagine, whether it's concrete as a book you're reading or an abstract as love that you feel for someone, it really has language that helps us understand and share meaning with others. This could be done in medical settings, this could be a legal document, instruction manuals, in an education, in aviation, cooking, baking. You get the point. It's all over in all fields. When you were in elementary school, you probably remember learning punctuation and spelling. And as you may have taken vocabulary tests to understand the words you came across in books or even in everyday life, this grammar rule helps make language easier to understand, creating a standardized way of communicating. When both the speaker and the listener understand these words, it's much easier to get the intended message across. Grammar rules, including punctuation, spelling, really contribute to effective communication by providing a standardized structure that helps convey meaning clearly and accurately. Punctuation marks, for example, guide the reader through the text, indicating pauses, stops, and the relationship between different parts of the sentence. Proper spelling ensures that words are recognized and understood correctly, preventing confusion. When both the speaker and the listener adhere to these rules, it becomes much easier to understand the intended message, therefore, reducing the chances of misinterpretation and enhancing overall communication effectively. Language is constantly changing with new words, new phrases popping up based on people's habits and experiences. For example, think about all the tech terms we've adapted in recent years. You might use tweeting, the location of a concert, so a friend can Google it and use it in the GPS app on their smartphone to find it. But back in the day, your parents or grandparents wouldn't have had a clue what any of these words mean. They still might not. But moreover, existing words often take on new meaning depending on on context or the era. For example, words like bad or sick have flipped from negative to positive meanings, and some words that were once common have become offensive or outdated as their meaning has evolved over time. Language can be trickier because of dialects, region specific rules or words that aren't used everywhere. As different regions and communities adapt their own norms, a trip across the country can feel like traveling to a different country. For instance, people in the northern United States may have a more common language wise with Canadians. Therefore, with people from Texas or Louisiana, Texans may have trouble understanding people from Louisiana. Despite being relatively close, in proximity, English adds to this complexity by constantly borrowing new words from other languages and spreading certain dialect rules more widely. On top of that, people often use phrases that have special meaning within culture or a large group. Every culture has their own. So, for example, chomping at the bit, it means eager to start, which might not make sense if you're not familiar with the verbal background of that in your culture. Sometimes a couple or a small group of friends might come up with their own sort of personal inside jokes. Or inside language that only they understand. A common type is sort of a nickname or a pet name used between romantic partners. This can be sweet, silly, or even a bit cheeky, but they hold special meaning within that relationship.